Hi all, welcome to The Wife of Caesar. My name is Michelevian, or Michelevian, either is fine. As you know, The Wife of Caesar is Streiner's project to talk about corruption or anti-corruption using words that everybody can understand so that we can fight corruption in our day-to-day lives with a little bit more than just good intentions. Okay, as usual, we will have a piece of news, a case, and a typology, and we are still doing our rundown of the 25 most iconic cases as listed by Transparency International. First, the piece of news. It is about Russia, again, once more, and probably forever. Russia is not cracking down on corruption. This is what's happening. Essentially, last week, the Russian government proposed a bill. It's a proposed law or a proposition where it proposed to the legislative body, to its Congress, that certain public officials would be excused from complying with anti-corruption rules because, to quote them, they are sometimes in exceptional circumstances and they cannot avoid violating the rules. So it's a way of saying, let's have a law that allows people to commit acts of corruption sometimes. We'll tell you when. Obviously, this is horrible. Let me tell you a little bit more about this. To give you context, in 2018, Vladimir Putin launched an anti-corruption plan. And this was in the context of several organizations, international organizations such as the OECD and the United Nations that Russia is a part of, and which organizations have been cracking down on corruption. Essentially, they have bribery groups. The countries get together and they work on addressing their corruption problems. And these organizations tell each country, you're doing very well on this thing or on this particular aspect, but you need some help or you need some work in this other aspect. So you should do whatever you need to do to prevent X, Y, or Z. And that's pretty much how that works. In the context of those recommendations, Russia began cracking down on corruption, or so it seemed. Putin launched an anti-corruption plan that seemed to be working for protecting the citizens against extortion and acts of corruption. However, this was in 2018. However, this year, 2019, last week, the Ministry of Justice, which is akin to a general prosecutor's office, the main authority or the main agency in charge of administering justice or enforcing laws, so essentially the government of Putin, proposed a bill, a legislation proposal to the equivalent of the Russian Congress, the Russian legislators. Government officials in exceptional circumstances would be exempt from complying with anti-corruption regulations, which is horrible. So you might be asking, what exactly are exceptional circumstances? And the Justice Ministry didn't say. There's no punchline to that. They didn't say. But they did promise to give examples once the bill is discussed. So essentially, you take my proposal and you take it to Congress and have the Congress people debate, the legislators debate my piece of law or my proposition, and then I'll give you some examples. However, they did say that in certain circumstances, they did issue an official statement saying that in certain circumstances, complying with restrictions and bans to prevent or settle conflicts of interest is impossible for objective reasons. Let's remember that conflict of interest is when the interest of an organization is different or is not aligned with the interests of its members. And when they say objective reasons, they mean situations that are outside the control of the public officials. So things like the weather or social conditions. I don't quite follow how objective reasons might make you exempt from being corrupt. Kind of weird. The Ministry of Justice was cited as saying that single industry cities, that is, cities devoted or revolving around mostly one piece of industry, mining, auto industry, production, things like that, or sometimes closed cities, or sometimes what they call the far north, so essentially Siberia and other regions like that, places that are remote or sparsely populated with tiny populations and very diffuse, people with long-term serious illnesses, and this is the kicker, cases where the former family of a public official choose to withhold their children's income. This is since seems kind of tailored to a particular specific reason, does the Russian government want to tell us something that we don't know? When they meant a former family member, they are talking about a former spouse, so an ex-wife, ex-husband. And these are the situations in which they consider, well, this person might be under such extenuating circumstances that she cannot possibly abide by the law. She cannot comply with anti-bribery laws, and she has to be given permission to take a bribe. To me, it doesn't make sense. It is a step back in the fight against corruption and in other trends, international trends, that we have been fighting very hard to institute. But hey, it's Russia. You only live once. Okay, let's move on to the case. Today we get to talk about Venezuela and their currency problems. Again, Transparency International turned 25 this year, and they issued a list of the 25 most iconic corruption cases, and we are doing a rundown of that list and giving you our opinion. Today is the case of Venezuela, and essentially the stepsons of Nicolás Maduro, the president of Venezuela, and this other guy, shady people, they formed a group that is known as Los Chamos. I have no idea what that means, and they abused their position of privilege and the exchange rate system in Venezuela to steal away about $1.2 billion. Billion with a B. Yeah. Beautiful people. Okay, so here's how it works. I'll give you a little bit of context. This all started in 2014, and you have to know that Venezuela is going through a very hard political and economic situation. Now, Venezuela has colossal, just amazing, impressive inflation. Inflation is the increase in the cost of living. So things increase in price or value every year. Every year things cost more, but every year, hopefully you make a little bit more money, and that's, inflation. It is the job of the government to control that inflation via its economic policies. And when the government is doing a really, really bad job, you get inflation rates like these. We hadn't seen inflation like this since we saw Zimbabwe, which is a country that, as you might know, went pretty much broke because of inflation and irresponsible economic policies. You might have seen sometime somewhere the $1 trillion note issued by the Zimbabwean government. That's a great example of inflation. Okay. In Venezuela, we have pretty much two exchange rates. An exchange rate is how much money of your currency, of your money, do you have to pay to get 1 unit of the currency of another country. So how many pesos in exchange for 1 yen, how many yen in exchange for 1 euro, how many euros in exchange for $1, and so on and so forth. In Venezuela, we have two exchange rates. The official one, which is controlled by the government, that is to say artificially controlled by the Central Bank of Venezuela, and the black market rate. And the black market rate follows the real commercial value of money, how much people are really willing to pay for $1. Okay, cool. Now, to date, the official exchange rate of Venezuelan bolivares is very close to 20,000 bolivares per each US dollar. Okay? Again, this is fictitious. This is artificially controlled by the government in order... Oh, okay, this is interesting. Why would a government pretend to have a currency that is more powerful or valuable? Because among other things, they have to keep the appearance of having a stable economy, and that way they get to say to the world, no, we don't have humanitarian issues. There's no reason for you to come into my country and meddle in my business. You stay far, far away from where you are, and I'll stay in power over here. Okay. Now, the black market rate, again, the real value of 1 bolivar versus $1 US is, to be honest, it is unknown to me. But for our purposes, for our example, let's say that it is 100,000 bolivares for each US dollar. So essentially 5 times bigger than the official rate. Again, I don't know this. I don't know the actual black market rate because 1, it's not published, and 2, you would have to have boots on the ground in Venezuela to have some idea of how much people are willing to pay for $1. But again, for our purposes, official rate 20,000, black market rate 100,000. So much bigger. Now, what happened here in 2014 is that these guys abuse their position of power because they have, undue influence, or they traffic in influence, as they know the president of Venezuela, and try to keep up. This is kind of, I might get confused. I'll try to do my best. But essentially what they did is, step one, these guys have US dollars. Let's say for our purposes that they have $1 US. Step two, they sell that US dollar at the black market rate. Again, 5 times the official rate. And they get, in exchange for that, the official rate for our purposes is 20,000 bolivares, right? So $1, and they sell it at the black market rate, so they get 100,000 bolivares, however much people are willing to pay for a dollar. They then decide to lend money to PVSA. PVSA means Petróleos de Venezuela, Sociedad Anónima, which is essentially the state-owned entity in Venezuela that is in charge of oil and fuel. They lend money to PVSA, to the government oil company, and that loan is given in bolivares, right? They give bolivares to the company as a loan. So they give, again, 100,000. However, the loan is denominated in US dollars. Now, what does it mean to denominate? When you denominate an operation, that means that you freely decide which currency you are using for a particular transaction. So if I might be selling, beans, and the transaction is carried out in Mexico between Mexicans, but we decide to denominate it in Japanese yen, that's allowed. You can do it. It's fairly common, and it's absolutely legal. So the loan is denominated in US dollars. However, because Petróleos de Venezuela is state-owned, it has to follow the official exchange rate. So they denominate, these people hand over 100,000 bolivares, black market $1, but Petróleos de Venezuela is obligated to pay official exchange rate, so $5. And they repeat however many times they want to do it, and they did it so many times that they embezzled $1.2 billion from the Venezuela government. At this point, this scandal has broken in the news for many years, and the Venezuelan government has issued statements saying that people have been investigated, processed, and put in jail for this scheme, this corruption scheme. However, to date, the only person that has gone to prison is Mr. Matthias Kuhl. He is a German banker, and he used to launder money, or he laundered the proceeds of this scheme for these very nice people that committed corruption. However, they themselves have not been apprehended. And finally, let's move on to our typology. Today, we have a change of pace. We have an anti-corruption typology. Okay, rupees, right? Rupees are the currency of several countries, among which is India. Now, India has an NGO called Fifth Pillar, and what they do is they fight corruption at a street level, at a citizen level. They help people fight corruption in their day-to-day lives. Where have we heard that before? Okay, a little bit of context. Facilitation payments, for those of you who don't remember, are bribes that we pay, tiny bribes that we pay to public officials to receive things to which we are already entitled, things that we have the right to receive. So let's say you go to a government official because you want to do whatever, a government process, maybe be issued a permit or something that is already your right. And she requires that you pay her a bribe, a small sum, and you pay that bribe because you want to, get your document. That is what we know as a facilitation payment. Payments that allow you to receive something that you already are entitled to. Okay, facilitation payments are very common in the developing world, in countries like Mexico, many countries in South America, and also India. They are fairly widespread, unfortunately. And one of the most common facilitation payments, in India at least, is 50 rupees. Anyone can grease the wheels of justice with 50 rupees. Now, what Fifth Pillar did as a form of protest is they issued a note, a counterfeit bill that is very similar, almost identical to the 50 rupee piece. However, this one says 0 rupees, even in numbers and in letters, and it also bears the logo and name of the organization. And they did this again. They did this as a protest. They print these fake bills, these fake notes, and they distribute them among the people and tell them whenever somebody wants to extract a bribe from you or a facilitation payment, you give them this note. And the purpose of this is not to fool the official into thinking that they received actual money, but the idea is to raise awareness. What has been reported to happen in many occasions is that the public official will receive the fake note, review it, and just sort of walk away in a pensive manner, return the note to the person, not require any more money, and actually do the thing that she is being paid to do. I think the idea behind this is to essentially make public officials aware that what they're doing is wrong and putting it right there in their face, explaining to them that this is an act of corruption and this is my form of protesting. Again, it's not 100% effective, but it is very creative. And because they are not actually counterfeiting money, they are not making 50 rupee notes, rather 0 rupee notes, it cannot be considered the crime of counterfeiting money. So it's actually very creative. So that was it for today. Thank you for joining us. And I will leave you, as I do every Monday, with this. Fight corruption, raise your voice, blow the whistle, but do so safely. If you're not sure whether or not what you're looking at is corruption, or you're not sure that you are physically safe, don't do anything, refrain from acting, and feel free to reach out to someone who might help you. Reach out to us at info@streiner.mx or log on to streiner.mx, where you can find detailed instructions on how to blow the whistle anonymously through the dark web, and you can stay safe. But above all, please do whatever you need to stay safe. Again, this was The Wife of Caesar. My name is Michel Levien, or Michel Levien, either is fine, and have a happy Monday.